Okay, so hi everyone. Welcome to the third virtual session I'm hosting as part of my Girl Scout Gold Award project. Thank you all for coming. I just want to reiterate one more time that the session is being recorded and will be uploaded to YouTube later today, so you can always go back and access it and others can watch it in the future. Today we'll be talking about civil engineering and hearing from two guest speakers about their experiences as Hispanics in the field of civil engineering. Before we get started, I want you all to take a minute to fill out the form I'm going to put in the chat. It's super quick, only one multiple choice question, and that's for the students. At the end of the session, you'll fill out the same form to see how much your mindset has changed. So I'll put it right now, and we will do that. Okay, so do that right now. It's super quick. Okay, so we have one more person. We're just gonna move on. That will still be in the chat. So today we'll be talking about civil engineering. So now that everyone's done, let's get started. The first thing I want to do is let you all meet our two guest speakers, Karla and Brandy. So Karla, I'll have you go first by telling us your name, a little bit about yourself, like where you're from, what company you work for, your job title. I don't think your audio is working.
All right, can we do another sound check?
Yep, it's working now. Great.
Sounds good. Hi, everyone. My name is Karla Padilla. I grew up in Chicago and I went to Marquette University to pursue my degree in civil engineering. I now work for Mortenson Construction and I've been with Mortenson for about 6 years now.
Okay, great. Now we'll have you go, Brandy. Can you just say a little bit about yourself?
Sure, thank you. My name is Brandy Creed. I'm originally from Costa Rica. I've been here most of my life now, but I studied civil engineering here in Florida. I have 2 master's degrees, one in water resources and one in construction management. All my degrees are from Florida International University, so I'm very loyal to FIU. I work for Jacobs Engineering, which is one of probably the largest engineering solutions company in the world with about 60,000 employees. And my focus in civil engineering has been in the design of water systems, but now I work on what's called the transit and rail market. And I'll talk about that later a little bit more.
Okay, great. So Brandy had mentioned that she had a short presentation she wanted to share, so we'll do that now, and she's going to talk a bit about what the field of civil engineering is. So go ahead.
Okay, can you all see my screen? All right, great. So I mentioned that I moved here when I was 14, and I actually was sharing with Rachel. I used to be a Girl Scout, and the way that I became an engineer was based on what I loved about being a Girl Scout in Costa Rica. So first, to give you a little bit more information about what civil engineering is. Civil engineering has kind of existed for a really long time. Building skills, construction really actually goes all the way back to ancient Egypt, since before Christ, like 2000 or more years before Christ. But civil engineering as a profession, you can go back to maybe like the year 1716 in France, where they started building bridges and highways. And then now it has become, it has spread into so many other different specialties in civil engineering, where you can see it in your communities, right? So where you see your neighborhood, the houses, the roads, the buildings, everything, there is civil engineering in it. And that's why it's called civil engineering. So if you look in the Encyclopedia Britannica, the definition of civil engineering has to do with designing for the public. That's why it's called civil engineering. So anything that the public will need: dams, bridges, buildings, drainage structures, sewer systems, tunnels, you name it, there is civil engineering in it. Now, not only civil engineers work on these projects. There's many other types of engineers that have to support and provide their expertise on these projects. So how I became a civil engineer was based on my experience on being a Girl Scout in Costa Rica. So when I lived in Costa Rica, we had to go camping a lot. We went on hikes. And one of the things that we had to do was make sure that we created a map. And to create a map, we were taught to use the topographic symbols. And I loved doing that when I was a Girl Scout. So that was my thing to do when I was a Girl Scout. And after I moved here, and my mom and my dad were asking me, well, what do you want to do when you need to start looking for a profession and to select a college? I told them that I like topography. So they told me, well, topography is something that you use. It's kind of a small part of a really big profession. You may want to look into civil engineering. And that's how I ended up looking into civil engineering. We do work with surveyors a lot to start projects. And so that's really the topography is the basis of a project. You have to collect information in the field about what the site looks like before you start building and designing. So again, just to overview, civil engineering is everywhere. So every community has a lot of civil engineering design in it. And in how it comes together, you have to plan, you have to design, you support the project through the approvals. There's construction, there's inspections, there's maintenance, there's operations. There's a lot of different aspects of civil engineering. It's not just you design a road or a highway. And before it looks like this aerial, right, which is kind of like what our neighborhoods look like, you start with something like this. And I know it's a little blurry, but the plans look like this. It's just black and white lines here and there that show you where the roads are, where the sewer systems, the drainage, how do you get water to the buildings, where are you going to have the sidewalks, where is there going to be lighting, landscaping, it's all on a white sheet of paper, and then you move forward from there to do construction. So my specific background, I mentioned, is in transit and rail. I had no idea transit and rail was a thing when I got out of school. Transit and rail has to do with anything to move people or goods. In this case, I'm showing you pictures of the monorail at Disney, right? Which a lot of you have probably been on. There is Sunrail in Orlando. That's another train system that I have worked with. And on the bottom corner, that's a building of the Brightline station, which I'm sure you have heard. That's another train service that we have in South Florida. And now we can go to Miami, from Miami to Orlando on a Brightline train. So how civil engineering is related to this is that, there aren't just only engineers to design the buildings. There are engineers that have to get involved with designing the actual vehicles that move the people. There are architects that have to help us. So we have to work with a lot of other disciplines. We work with planners. We work with financial experts to make sure the projects have enough money to be built and maintained later. We have communication specialists, and the communications are not just communicating with like a Verizon or like your cell phones providers. It's communicating with the community to make sure you have approval of the project that's going to be built. There are manufacturers, right, that actually build the trains or the buses. And then there's the operations and maintenance experts that we all have to work together. In these pictures that I shared here, this is a dispatcher for a train center. So this is kind of like what a dispatcher looks at when he's looking at the railroad tracks. There are maintenance people for the tracks to make sure that they're aligned, that there's no instability for when the train passes, so that there's no derailment. And then there's all these different symbols of what the signalization system is for a train to operate. So overall, I just wanted to say that we need a lot of young people to go for civil engineering. It's very, especially in the transit and rail market, you can't find people that come from school that have that knowledge or that have that experience already. So usually to go into rail and transit, you kind of fall into that because there aren't really a lot of schools, especially in Florida, that teach civil engineering focused in rail and transit. But we do need a lot of people. I have a lot of needs for project managers, young project managers or engineers. And most of the ones that I'm getting right now are not in the US. They're outside of the US. So there's a lot of demand. And you don't have to get approved to get into an engineering school. You can just apply, and we can talk about grades a little bit later. But it's not as difficult as going into medical school or going into like physical therapy. I know there's lots of hoops you have to jump over to get into those schools. And that's all. Let me stop sharing now.
Yeah, that was really great. Thank you, Brandy. Okay, so from here on out, I'm gonna ask a couple questions, and both Brandy and Karla can answer when you're ready. So either of you can go first, depending on what you prefer, or if you need a minute to think about it. For all the students, if you have a burning question, you can raise your hand to ask it once someone is done speaking, but we'll have a Q&A at the end. So if you can wait, just leave it for then, and we'll try to get it answered. So let's get started. So the first question is, what do each of you do in a typical day, and what does your average workload look like? Maybe Karla can go first.
I can go first. So I'm really glad that Brandy did that presentation. I thought it was awesome because I think one of the things that I didn't understand when I first got into the civil engineering world was that there are many facets, and civil engineering is just an umbrella, but there's so many different categories under that umbrella that you can pursue. So me specifically, I went into the construction management side of things. So in a day-to-day situation, I get to the job site. I'm on a construction site every single day. I get there at 7 a.m. I do bend and stretch with the craft workers. So when I say craft workers, think of like the electricians, the plumbers, the sheet metal guys, like they're all out there. We're all, stretch and bending at the same time. And then typically I go for like a site walk and check in on the progress of the project and what materials got there, who's going to be where, what's, going on. And then depending on where the project is in, whether it's in the beginning of construction or the end of the construction project, there's always documentation management that needs to be done. So typically at the beginning of the project, you're checking, am I ordering the right, I don't know, am I ordering the right water fountain that's going to be in this building? Am I ordering the right faucets and plumbing fixtures that the end user is going to be, using? So, and at the end of it, you're, which is where I'm at right now in the project that I'm at, we're looking at closeout documents, and like you have to be ready. The construction team has to be ready to turn a building over to the next person, the end user, so they can, own and operate the facility in the most efficient way possible. So a day to day, it's kind of out in the field. It's a mix of being out in the field and doing some documentation on the back end. And then also my role now, I'm doing financials for the project. So what gets billed to the owner versus what we have to, pay for ourselves. And, money's, it's a big topic because construction is, it's expensive. So it definitely matters where that, where your budget lies. So I guess all encompassing, I would say safety, quality, and the budget are what I do in a day-to-day scenario for my job.
Thank you, Karla. Yes, so my day-to-day now is very different than my day when I was out of school. Like when I came out of school, I was strictly sitting in front of a computer working with a senior engineer designing, and I was just designing on a computer. Now I'm much more like a management role, similar to Karla, but I don't have to go to the field as much. So in my role for Rail and Transit, what I do is I manage the people that are supporting a railroad system. So it could be somebody that's supporting the operations of the railroad. For example, at Sunrail, we have a person that is overseeing all of the new improvements that need to be done on the railroad to make sure the railroad continues to operate. We also have a person that manages all of the quality for the railroad. And so there's a group that report to me, and I make sure that they have the resources that they need, that they have the experts to design the things that need to be designed. And I deal with the client for whatever it is that he needs. It could be something, an advice for financial, a resource. It could be for finding out what another railroad does in the country to see if they can have a lessons learned exchange, or it could be representing him or providing information so that they can speak to a politician. So it's very different than actually just designing every day. Now I'm more of managing, consulting, sometimes listening to the issues, and just being able to provide solutions, whatever they may be.
Yeah, that's great. Both super cool. So we see a lot of like the day-to-day side sometimes with jobs, but people don't talk as much about obstacles that they face. So the next question is, what obstacles have each of you faced in your career, and how did you overcome them? Who wants to go first?
I can go, yeah. So I think just an overall obstacle that I've had is kind of getting out of my own head sometimes, because it can be really funky to walk into a room and you're the only female, or you're the only female of color, or the only person of color, right? So I would say like a lot of it is like, and these things are noticed. Like you walk into a room and you're like, wow, like I'm the only person that looks like me here. So I think like one thing that's been big for me is kind of getting out of my own head and being able to tell myself every day, like, you're meant to be here. You have a space at this table. Like you're here for a reason. No one can take that away from you, kind of thing. So I would say a lot of the obstacles, especially being in like the construction field, is like everybody's a white man, and when you're not, you're like, oh man, you second guess yourself and you play that mind game. But it's really been a big hurdle for myself to be able to jump through that and say, no, this is for me. I'm okay here. I'll be fine.
I 100% agree with Karla. I've had that issue since I was in college, really. But to give you a more specific example, one in college and one now when I'm working in school. I didn't start college with a high level of math and science. Because I moved here when I was 14, I went to high school as a bilingual student, so I fell behind a lot in math and science. So when I went to college, I had to catch up quite a bit, and I did not do well. I had really low grades at the beginning, where I second guessed myself. Should I be doing this? Is this what I'm supposed to be studying? But I stuck with it. I really enjoyed it. My GPA was very low during the first year. I had a 1.7 GPA. I mean, I almost got kicked out of school. But I think the lesson from that is persevering. If you really like it, it doesn't matter how hard it is, you're gonna get through it. Also, passing my license exam after I finished school. I had to take the exam 5 times. It took me a long time to be able to pass it, but I stuck with it. And then at work, with different people, different supervisors that I've had to deal with who are also usually male and not Hispanic. I have second guessed myself, but then you have to listen to your gut, right? If you have that feeling that, you feel like, wait a minute, but if I do that, I'm going to be going against what I feel. I'm going to be going against who I feel I am. If that's how you feel, you need to listen to that. And that's the biggest lesson that I've learned, to make sure that if I feel, even though he has more experience than I do, and he's telling me that's what it is, no, not really.
Yeah, I think it's a common theme throughout a lot of STEM fields that people can often feel a sense of like imposter syndrome, that they don't belong, but definitely your advice strikes a chord. So the next question is, what has been each of your favorite parts of working in civil engineering? Have you had a favorite project or assignment? Yeah.
So my favorite project, I think, even to this day, has been, I was working on a school in Minnesota, and they were building like an addition. And even though I was only there for 6 months, my project manager and the senior project manager, who's like the boss's boss, they were both women. And I felt like I saw a lot of myself in the senior project manager, because we're both, a little more soft spoken, like not the type of person to like raise our voice or like get upset. So it was crazy and like really great to see that there's someone who is just like me, who is able to make it farther than I have, which kind of gave me like a push and like a, no, like this is for me. And then on top of that, like just the project team that was out there and all of the people that were working on that job were just great, and they cultivated such a great culture to be on. And this is when I was newer in my career, so a lot of it was like, I didn't know what was up yet. So I think that's been my favorite experience so far, is being able to see someone who's personality wise just like me, who's been able to just crush it out there in the field.
For me, it was a project that I finished probably about 6 years ago, and it's here in Pompano, in Florida, and it was a combination of a tri-rail train station and the tri-rail operations center. It was we call it a campus, and what was so cool about it was that it was the first train station that we were able to build for tri-rail that was LEED certified. So it's like an environmentally friendly station that has very low energy use. It has solar panels for the cars to park under, and then also generate power for the station and the operations building. It had more efficient elevators also to use for the pedestrians. And we had to build it during operations of the station. And so we couldn't just shut down the station. The station had to continue to operate to the passengers. Trains still needed to go by. So it was a big undertaking. And I learned so much, and I really loved that project.
Yeah, okay. So one of the questions that we also had sent in was, what was the most challenging project or assignment that you've been assigned? So, like, what would you guys think about that?
I can start on that one. I think for me, it wasn't necessarily a project. It was a responsibility that I had to take on, and I had no experience and I had no knowledge of how to do it. And it was the maintenance of the tracks. One thing is to design and build something, but when you have to maintain it, it's a completely different perspective. And I had to, and the reason why it was a huge responsibility is because maintenance of the railroad tracks are, you have to report to the federal government. And they are so strict that if there are things that are not documented correctly or inspected when they're supposed to be inspected, you can get fined. And some people can get kicked out of having a job. So it was very, very intense, very scary for me, but it was very rewarding because I learned so much more about a completely different perspective and a different area of expertise in civil engineering, and it's how to measure track, how to check the ballast, which is the rock under it, how to visually inspect the ties, which are the wood that crosses the rails. That was the scariest and but also very rewarding, like I said.
I would say, I guess for me, so right now I'm working on a couple data centers for Meta, and I've been at the same project for 3 years, and we've, done continuous builds of these data centers. But when I first started out there, I was one of the first people on site, and there was maybe 3 or 4 of us, and it was a whole like soybean and corn field, like it was nothing before we got there. So I guess learning the different, and especially like working for Meta, they are uh, a big organization and they have a ton of people that they have to report to. So I think I learned a ton because not only was it like the questions they would ask or pose were like, they're tough questions. It's like, oh, I never thought about it like that. Or, you're constantly like, well, not on the defense, but like you're building your case, I guess, on why things should go this way or why you should do something in this manner. And it just gave me a new perspective on some of the questions. And, when you're kind of pressed and how, when people are asking you like, well, why, it gives you like a good perspective on how to like build a case on like, okay, backtracking on, okay, it's not just going to go like this because we say so or because we think it goes this way. So you basically you're starting from zero and you're building up from there, kind of thing, if that makes sense, kind of, you're basically like it prepared me, I guess, for today's world in just building a case for yourself, like having people ask you tough questions and why you're doing something isn't always easy. And especially coming from different projects where smaller projects where the, owners would just kind of hands off kind of thing. Being on this project was very challenging because they are involved with every facet of construction. And so it was tough at first, but now that we've been there for 3 years, we have a great relationship, love the people that we work with. So at first, when you're struggling to build something there, but it works out. As long as you keep having those tough conversations and have people ask you tough questions or you ask them tough questions, then you'll get there. And there's a mutual respect and understanding that comes from it at the end of the day.
Yeah, that's great. And a lot of people can sometimes feel like these challenges can set them back, or maybe they're not qualified to go into these engineering fields. But my question is, what advice would you have to these young people who are unsure if they could become an engineer because of their background or their knowledge?
I think my biggest advice would just be go for it. Just I never thought of myself as like someone who would be an engineer, but now kind of looking back on some of the things that I did as a kid, or even some of the tendencies I had. Like, for example, I played with Barbies all day long. And growing up on the south side of Chicago, my mom couldn't afford a Barbie dream house, right? So I would take like chairs or stools and like take the shelving out of the TV console, and that would be Barbie's two-story flat right there. And like, so if I would say, if you are someone who can see past a problem and you already know what the execution is going to be, you're a problem solver, you're an engineer already. So go for it.
I agree with Karla. I now looking back at what I used to love doing when I was little, definitely the engineering was already in me. I'm very process oriented. I'm very I like to know. I like to plan. I like schedules. I love spreadsheets. But one thing I wanted to highlight for the young people is, if you've listened to what Karla and I have shared with you about our day and what we do, is we don't sit all day and do equations right now. I know that when you are thinking about engineering, the first thing that a lot of people think is, oh, you have to be good in math. You do not have to be good in math. You have to like black and white. And that was the thing that guided me into engineering too, was that I knew if I solved a math problem, it was going to be wrong or right. It wasn't going to be like an essay that somebody gives you an opinion of what they think it is good or not. That's why I like science and math, because there's no opinion from anybody to tell you if it's wrong or right. And I would say it also, don't think about engineering or construction as something that is too rough or not pretty, I guess. It can be, projects can get messy, but the end results are always beautiful. They're, the buildings, the way to access a tunnel or the highways. There are some bridges that are, you look at them, I look at them and I'm like, wow, that's a beautiful bridge. Because there are so many things that you can do now with technology and lighting and color, that these projects can really be pretty. And like I said, from what I shared, you don't have to be great in math, you don't have to be great in science, you just have to be interested in doing something and want to be a problem solver. You're not going to sit down every day and just work on equations all day long. And like I said, we need people in engineering. We do a lot.
Yeah, I love that like analogy that everyone is an engineer if you think problems through, and the Barbie dream house is something that lots of people can relate to. So I love that. So that's all my questions for now, and your answers were great, but I'll turn it over to if anyone else has questions. Raise your hand or type it in the chat. We'll see if we can answer it. Don't be shy. I want you guys to be able to talk to Brandy and Karla, so go ahead.
Rachel, I wanted to share something while everybody's thinking. So I didn't always know that I wanted to be an engineer. I thought that I wanted to be a doctor from the beginning. From as long as I can remember, I wanted to be a doctor. And the reason why I decided not to be a doctor was because I didn't want to go to school so many years. That was what I thought. I don't want to have to go to school. I don't know, 10 years. It seemed like it was a long time to become a doctor. And I also didn't want to be on a job where I had to be on call 24/7, because I wanted to have a normal life. Right. That was my analogy. And that's why I said, no more, no medicine. I'm gonna go into something else. And that's how I fell into engineering. But it's kind of ironic because I ended up working for the government for a while for Tri-Rail, and the job that I had when I had to take over the maintenance of the tracks, I had to be on call. I had to be on call every day, because if there's an issue on the railroad doesn't stop. You have to address it. And I ended up going back to school to get 2 master's degrees just because I wanted to. And I probably ended up going to school the same amount of years that I would have if I would have gone for a doctorate degree. So I just wanted to share that story.
Yeah, I definitely think it's a common theme with a lot of people in STEM that consider medicine, but I think people just kind of see those careers as very like black and white, and I think a lot of the STEM careers uh you can do whatever you want in all of them, and there's different pathways to success in so many different careers. So yeah, I definitely think that's an interesting point. Okay, so questions in the chat. How long are your work days? This is pretty interesting because you were talking about work-life balance. So yeah.
I'll be honest. So it kind of depends on where we are at with, within construction and how many people you have to support your team too. So there were days that I worked like 12 hours and I still didn't feel like I was done with work. And there's been days where I've come in and I've worked like 6 hours and it took me time to even fill those days up because it just ebbs and flows so much. So I think it can vary. And I think one thing that I want to touch on too is like depending on where you go, you're not always like going to be paid hourly. So me personally, I'm paid on a salary basis. So as long as I am producing, moving the project forward, that can look like a ton of hours. That could look like just a little bit of hours. So it's a different measurement than just like you clock in and you clock out. It's like, how are you progressing? How are you moving this forward to beat that deadline, meet that deadline? Like Brandy was saying, we're all on schedules here. So you have to, yeah, it's a different performance task.
Yeah, same for me. I've had, it depends on what project you're working on or what task it is that you're doing. I've had all-nighters, especially earlier in my career because I was new and I was learning so much and I wanted to make sure that I met the deadline. So I've had all-nighters. But my days vary also depending on a task that I'm working on right now. I don't do all-nighters as much anymore, but I still have done them. And I did one actually recently in July because we had a tunnel cost estimate that we had to submit the next day. And we were so behind that I said, that's it. I'm going to take it on and I'm going to do it. I'm going to finish it. The people who needed to work on it were not available. And I'm not a tunnel expert, but I can figure out who I can get the information from to get this tunnel cost estimate. And I had to pull it together and I did it. Most of the days are about 8 hours. Sometimes more than that.
Yeah, I definitely think it can fluctuate a lot. So the next question that is in the chat is how long did it take you to become a civil engineer? So you kind of answered it with your education, but you can talk about it more.
Yeah, I went to school a little bit more than 4 years. I went every semester, and I packed my semesters with as many classes as I could. I took a heavy load because I didn't want to go to school 5 years. I did not have scholarships. I only had grants. So, I had one scholarship, but it was only like $2,000. Um, so I had to make sure that I used my money wisely and fast because they were not going to pay for there was an allocated number of funds for that grant, and if I didn't use it, and if I went to school and in 1 year and took more classes than I could even for that year, there was a limit on the number of dollars that I had available to me. So it took me I would say 4.5 years to get my degree. And then after that, you have to pass your license exam to be able to practice as an engineer. And for that, you have to wait at least 4 years to work under another engineer. But it took me 5 years to get my license because, like I said, I failed it 5 times.
And then for me, I did 5 years of undergraduate at Marquette. So in one of the programs that my school had was called a co-op program. So essentially it broke up the academic years that you were doing and sandwiched in a year of working under a professional engineer. So I did my freshman and sophomore year. And then once that was finished, I did a whole year of doing like road construction and under a civil engineer on the design side of things. And then the last 2 years was finishing out my academics with my junior and senior year. So 5 years to get my undergrad. And sandwiched in there, I had some internships. And I ultimately decided that going down the construction path was probably more where my heart was and what my passion was. I like seeing the tangible and being able to see what's on a paper and, I can see it 3D come to life kind of thing. So I ended up not pursuing getting my license. So all in all, to do what I'm doing, it took me 5 years.
Yeah, I think once again, like we've said, it can vary based on like what you do and with your time and how your work-life balance is. So yeah, I think it's good to see different examples of people taking longer, shorter, or going back to school, whatever. Okay, so I guess that's it. If nobody else has any other questions, I know we all have busy schedules, so two last things and then we're free to go. So first of all, I want to thank both Karla and Brandy for coming today to talk to us because you've been so great. So thank you both. And then the last thing we're going to do is I'm going to send another link in the chat and to the students, please fill it out again. It's just another short survey. And once you've done that, you're free to go. So thank you all for coming. And once again, this session is being recorded and will be uploaded later today. So thank you all.
Rachel, if you don't mind, I wanted to
Mhm.
offer Savannah Road. Well, I say Savannah. I'm not sure if it's Savannah, but
Mhm.
whoever the Savannah profile wrote that they really want to become an engineer. So I would like to offer, if you want to share my contact information with anybody who reaches out to you who's interested in talking one-on-one about what engineering is, or how they should prepare. I would love to help anybody steer them our way.
Yeah, if you guys are okay with it, I can add your contact information to the description of the YouTube video, and then anyone watching it can contact you later. So I'll definitely do that.
Yeah,
Thank you
thank you
guys.
for having us. I
Thank
was going
you.
to share the same sentiment. If
Mhm.
anybody has any questions, feel free to share my contact information. Would love to talk to you guys more about what it means to be in the engineering world and some of the different facets that you can pursue under that.
Great.
Great. Great. Well, have an awesome Saturday.
You too.
Thank you.
Thank you guys.
Bye.